Hello everyone, I'm going to talk about what it's like visiting Belize during COVID because I've been getting a lot of questions about that and conditions for travel are always changing, so that's what we're going to go through. So I've been here for almost 11 months now, and it's hard for me to imagine being anywhere else. And some of the reasons are all the fantastic activities that I talked about in my last video, but you can see one of the ones on the picture here, which was at Naughty Crab, and it was Hollywood Squares, which was fantastic. And they do Wheel of Fortune nights and bingo and all kinds of things that are really cool there. So I'm gonna get into some of the details next. So here's a handy infographic that gets put out and updated periodically. So this one was as of August 5th, 2021, because things haven't changed from this. So in step one, it talks about planning the visit. And generally speaking, the rules right now are you need an immigration form and you have to stay in a gold standard hotel if you're an international tourist. Now, there are some exceptions that I wanted to go through that might help when you're trying to travel. So if you own a home here, like I do, then I'm exempted from that gold standard. Also, long stay non-nationals, so people that are renting for a long period of time, that doesn't apply. So it's helpful if that's your situation where you've secured a rental to just bring a copy of your lease. And then also the other thing that I've used quite a bit recently is people that are visiting friends and relatives. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I'm talking about people that have came recently. And then on arrival, it talks about the vaccinations here, which I'll get into, so I'm not going to go through it here. And then, enjoying your stay, follow all the protocols, which we'll get into, and of course taking a COVID test prior to leaving. So those are the kind of things to look at, and the website is here as well, so you can look at it if there are any questions you have on what the government rules are. So in terms of the vaccination requirements, in Belize you don't have to have a vaccination to enter. What you need is a negative COVID test. It has to be PCR within the last 96 hours or rapid within the last 48. They do have an option to get the test on arrival for $50 US, but that'll depend where you're coming from if you need to get a test to fly. So what the rules I'm going to go through is for Canada and the US. So if you're traveling in Canada by air or rail, you do need a vaccination. So WestJet, for example, right on their website shows that starting November 30th, you have to show your proof of vaccination during check-in. So obviously, even though you could get it on arrival, you're already going to need it if it's after November 30th. So it's kind of good to follow these rules where you're getting the PCR test or the rapid test before you travel. Now, if you're traveling through the US or going to the US, the rules there show that as of November 8th, any non-US citizen traveling to the US has to show proof of vaccination before traveling by air. And then you also need the negative COVID test, but at least there you can have the rapid test, which is a bit different than how Canada is currently for arriving there. Now, the timing of test is different depending on if you're vaccinated or not, so you can look at all the rules with the CDC on the link I had here. I don't want to put too much in here because all these things will change over time. So make sure you verify everything because this is at a point in time only, which is in November, so things could always change. So to summarize the different requirements when you're coming into the country, it depends if you want to get a COVID test before you leave or when you get here. And that's assuming, of course, your flight doesn't require you to get it in advance, which you have to check every airline depending on when you're coming. So I had went to the US for a short trip in August. And when I got back, I didn't have my COVID test because it was kind of complicated for me to figure out where to get it. I was in Seattle and I didn't have a car. So most people coming in did have their COVID test already. So that lineup was a lot longer, but I got my test and I actually caught up with those people. So it didn't take me very long. And obviously that wasn't that busy here in August. Then the next people that came in that I know were my friend and daughter, and they came in on November 13th, and they didn't have tests either. And the lineup for the people tested was longer, but they were so efficient that they ended up in line pretty much just behind the people that already had the test done. So not much different. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about flights. So when you get into Belize City, if you want to come to the island, you can book flights through Maya Air or Tropic, and I put all the details of that in my last video on traveling to Belize. But basically, what's the timing of the flights you should book? So I recommended they book 2 hours after their arrival into Belize City, and that worked out perfectly. They were ready to leave probably just after an hour after they arrived. Now, if Maya had availability and they were done, for the earlier flight, Maya would have put them on that flight. So Maya Island flights typically are going every hour right now. And so if you even booked 3 hours in between, which is maybe what the airline would recommend, they'll put you on the earlier flight if possible. I had another friend that just came in yesterday, and he was coming in from Mexico actually into Belize City, and he actually missed his Maya Island flight connection because their flight was delayed from Cancun on Tropic Air. And so for him, though, they just put him on the next flight. So they are really, really flexible with this, generally speaking, so that's good to know about. So now I want to get in the other restrictions. So when you're in Belize, the curfew is currently 9 p.m. But because tourism season really kicks up here on the island and in general, on November 22nd, they're changing it to be 10 p.m. weekdays and 11 p.m. weekends. And that could obviously change, so check before your trip to see what it'll be. And in general, the curfew hasn't bothered me all that much. When I first got here, it was 8 p.m., which was definitely early. Now that it's been 9, there's only been a few times where we're like, oh, it'd be so nice to stay later. In general, it gets dark so early here. It's just after 5 p.m. where the sun's setting now, and it rises just after 5 a.m. So we do kind of tend to go to bed a little earlier here and get up early, so it's not a huge deal, but the change to go 10 and 11 on weekends is definitely nice. And now masks are required in all public places, including outdoors. And the reason for that seems odd to some people, but in a lot of cases, it's a little hard to social distance on the sidewalks and where there's golf carts and people driving. But luckily, they do have some exceptions. So when you're on a golf cart, you don't need to wear it, although a lot of people choose to. When you're exercising or in the water, you don't need to. And when you're at your table at a restaurant. So we do get in the habit of always having a mask with us. That is very critical to do. But there are a lot of times we're not wearing it because we're sitting places and so on. And you've seen from my pictures that there's tons of activities and lots of things to do. So it does keep you very busy. Now, occupancy is restricted, so if you're going to a popular place, like for the activities I've talked about, like the Hollywood Squares, Wheel of Fortune, or the crab races, which I covered in my last video on traveling to San Pedro, make sure you make a reservation because there is limited seating because of this. And I mean, I don't even mind the fact that you have to make a reservation because you make sure you get a table because people aren't allowed to stand around anywhere. The tables make it so that they know how many people they can have, and that makes it really, really good because I don't like standing. I like to have a table to sit at anyway. I already talked about the gold standard requirement, and pretty much there's tons and tons of hotels that are signed up for this if you are a tourist. And as I mentioned, though, if you're coming to visit friends or family, then you can just check that and you don't need that gold standard reservation. But whatever category there is, make sure you have something to show the officials if they ask. My friends that have all came in recently weren't even asked at all. They just said friends and family, that kind of thing. There was no problem at all. But just make sure you have it just in case you get asked. So as I've mentioned in my other videos, I do have a website that has a lot of resources, including Belize 101 videos and handbooks, and lots of other resources, including how to travel for free, and I had a video on that as well. So take a look for any resources you might need, and certainly reach out if you have any questions, and I hope to see you soon in Belize.